Section 1. Laughter in the Mud. November 30th, 1941. West of Moscow, near the frozen approaches to Klin. The engine of Unteroffizier Karl Weiss's Panzer III coughs as he slams the hatch shut, sealing out the bitter Russian wind. Frost creeps along the inside of the steel, forming thin white veins on the turret walls. Outside, snow drifts across the steppe, mixing with churned mud frozen hard by night temperatures well below zero. Weiss rubs his gloved hands together and peers through the vision slit. Ahead, the column of German armor inches forward, tracks grinding, suspensions groaning. This is not how Blitzkrieg is supposed to feel. The war in the East was meant to be over months ago. Moscow was supposed to fall before winter. Instead, winter has arrived first. Over the intercom, his commander's voice crackles with irritation. Keep interval. Watch the tree line. Weiss nods, though no one can see him. He has heard rumors over the past week, stories passed along between crews during brief halts. Russian tanks. New ones. Big, clumsy-looking machines with sloped armor and oversized tracks. Some of the older veterans laugh at the idea. Another Soviet tractor with a gun. One crewman had joked 2 days earlier. They weld plates together and call it tank. Weiss had laughed too. The Red Army, after all, has spent months retreating. Their tanks, BTs, T-20 burn easily when hit. Thin armor. Poor optics. Crews that panic under fire. That is what German doctrine teaches, reinforced by months of victories. The Panzer III, with its 5 cm KWK 38 gun, is supposed to be more than enough. The column slows, then stops. Through his binoculars, Weiss spots dark shapes ahead, partially obscured by drifting snow. At first glance, they look ungainly. Low silhouettes, squat turrets, thick hulls smeared with whitewash and mud. Contact front, the commander snaps. Russian armor. Weiss leans closer to the slit. The tanks are unlike anything he has seen before. The hull sides slope sharply inward. The turret is cast, rounded, almost crude in appearance. Wide tracks bite confidently into snow and ice where German vehicles struggle for traction. Someone laughs over the radio. That's it. That's their wonder weapon. Another voice adds, ugly bastards. The Russian tanks advance without hesitation. Range, the commander asks. 800 meters, comes the reply. Fire when ready. The Panzer III lurches as Weiss fires. The shell streaks out, striking the lead Soviet tank squarely on the glassy plate. There's a sharp clang. No explosion. No penetration. The shell ricochets upward, vanishing into the gray sky. Inside the turret, silence. Weiss blinks. Hit, he says instinctively. But no effect. Fire again, the commander orders. Another round slams into the same tank, this time closer. Again, it deflects, leaving only a bright scar on the sloped armor. The Soviet tank does not slow. It keeps coming, engine roaring, tracks chewing through snow like it barely exists. Then the Russian tank fires back. German tank crews mocked the T-34 until they faced it outside Moscow. The impact rocks the Panzer III violently. A deafening crack fills the turret. Shrapnel sprays from the mantlet. Weiss is thrown against the turret wall, his helmet ringing. Driver, reverse, the commander shouts. The Panzer jerks backward, engine straining. Around them, other German tanks are firing, shells bouncing uselessly or shattering against armor that seems to reject them outright. The Soviet tanks are closer now. Weiss can see the red stars on their turrets, the rough welds, the sheer mass of them. One of them fires again. A Panzer to their left erupts in flame, its turret hatch blown open, smoke pouring into the frozen air. This is not a tractor. This is not crude. This is something else entirely. Over the radio, confusion spreads. Our rounds are not penetrating. They're immune at this range. What the hell is that thing? The laughter is gone. The German formation begins to falter. Orders overlap. Crews maneuver desperately, trying to flank to get side shots. Even then, penetration is uncertain. The Soviet tanks absorb hits that would have destroyed any vehicle the Germans have faced so far. Inside his turret, Weiss feels a tightness in his chest that has nothing to do with the cold. He realizes, in that moment, that something fundamental has changed. The Red Army is no longer simply retreating. It has brought something new to the battlefield. And the German Panzer crews, who mocked, dismissed, and underestimated it, are now facing the consequences in the snow outside Moscow. Section 2. First Blood in the Snow. December 1st, 1941. The Klin Salient. The battlefield is a chaos of sound and motion. Engines roar, steel shrieks, and the flat crack of cannon fire echoes across the frozen ground. Snow is churned into dirty clouds by spinning tracks, reducing visibility to a few hundred meters at best. In the confusion, German panzer crews fight instinctively, falling back on training that suddenly feels inadequate. Unteroffizier Karl Weiss grips the turret rail as his Panzer III slews sideways, the driver struggling to maintain control on ice-glazed earth. Over the intercom, the commander barks clipped orders, his voice tight now, stripped of earlier confidence. Flank them. Aim for the sides. Close range only. That is the doctrine when armor proves stubborn. Get close. Get around. Kill from the side. But the Soviet tanks, T-34s, though the name is not yet widely known among German crews, do not oblige. They advance aggressively, turrets traversing smoothly, crews coordinating with a discipline the Germans did not expect. Their 76.2 millimeters guns thunder, and with each impact another panzer shudders, burns, or falls silent. Weiss watches one of the Russian tanks crest a low rise, its sloped armor shedding snow like water. A German shell strikes its turret ring and glances away. The T-34 answers instantly. The return shot punches through the Panzer's frontal armor as if it were thin sheet metal. Flames burst from the engine deck. The crew does not escape. God help them, Weiss mutters. Radio traffic dissolves into fragments. Reports of new heavy Russian tanks. Calls for anti-tank guns. Demands for air support that cannot arrive in this weather. The Luftwaffe, once omnipresent, is grounded by snowstorms and mechanical failures. Some German crews attempt desperate measures. High explosive rounds are fired at tracks, hoping to immobilize. Smoke is deployed to mask withdrawals. A few Panzer IVs with short-barreled 7.5 centimeters guns fire at close range, managing to damage or disable T-34 only under ideal conditions. It is not enough. The engagement breaks apart into scattered duels and frantic retreats. German tanks withdraw toward defensive positions, leaving burning wrecks behind them. Soviet infantry follows the armor closely, moving through the snow with grim determination, rifles at the ready. By late afternoon, the ground is littered with twisted metal. Weiss's unit regroups behind a frozen tree line. The panzer crews climb out of their vehicles, faces pale, breath steaming. No one jokes now. No one laughs. An officer walks the line, clipboard in hand, noting losses. Too many. Weiss overhears fragments of conversation. Our guns are useless. Armor sloped like that. It deflects everything. They drive straight through mud like it isn't there. Another crewman shakes his head. They're supposed to be backwards. That's what they told us. That evening, as darkness falls early under heavy clouds, the survivors huddle near their vehicles, engines idling for warmth. Rations are eaten mechanically. Fingers numb. Minds racing. The name T-34 begins to circulate. Captured documents and hurried intelligence reports confirm it. A new Soviet medium tank. Sloped armor up to 45 millimeters thick, effectively far more resistant than its raw number suggests. Wide tracks that distribute weight evenly, allowing movement where German tanks bog down. A diesel engine, less prone to fire and more reliable in cold conditions than German gasoline engines. To German engineers and commanders, the implications are unsettling. This is not an accident. This is not improvisation. This is deliberate design. At higher headquarters, reports from Army Group Center pile up. Field officers describe shock encounters with Russian tanks that cannot be penetrated at normal combat ranges. Requests are sent for heavier guns, new ammunition, anything that can restore balance. On the front lines, German soldiers adapt as best they can. Anti-tank guns are pulled forward, camouflaged, placed at choke points. Crews are instructed to aim for tracks, vision ports, turret rings. Tank hunters armed with Panzer rifles and bundles of grenades prepare to engage at suicidal ranges. Losses mount on both sides. The Red Army pays heavily too. Many T-34 crews are inexperienced. Coordination is sometimes crude, but the machine itself forgives mistakes. It absorbs punishment and keeps moving. By December 2nd, the German advance toward Moscow has stalled once again. And among the Panzer crews, a realization takes root. Quiet, heavy, undeniable. They're no longer fighting an enemy that is merely numerous. They're fighting one that has learned, adapted, and struck back with a weapon that challenges German superiority at its core. The laughter that once greeted rumors of Russian tanks has vanished completely. In its place is something far more dangerous. Respect. Section 3. The shock reaches high command. December 3rd, 1941. Army Group Center Headquarters, near Smolensk. The room is cold despite the iron stove burning in the corner. Maps cover every wall, their edges curling from damp and use. Red and blue grease pencil lines intersect in chaotic patterns, marking advances that have stalled and counterattacks that refuse to collapse. General Heinz Guderian stands with his greatcoat still on, gloves tucked under one arm. He listens in silence as a staff officer reads aloud the latest reports from the front. Repeated engagements with new Soviet medium tanks. Panzer III ineffective at standard combat ranges. Penetration only possible from flank or rear at close distance. Panzer IV marginally effective. Guderian closes his eyes briefly. He had seen this coming. Not this tank, not this moment, but the danger of assuming the enemy was incapable of innovation. For months, German intelligence had dismissed Soviet armor development as crude, derivative, and technologically backward. The Red Army was expected to collapse under pressure. Instead, it has produced a machine that threatens the foundation of German armor doctrine. Where are these reports coming from? Guderian asks. Klin, Istra, Volokholamsk, multiple corps, the officer replies. Guderian nods slowly. That confirms it. This is not an isolated encounter. This is systemic. He orders immediate action. Captured tanks are to be secured and shipped back for inspection. Frontline units are to report detailed observations, armor angles, gun performance, mechanical behavior in cold weather. Anti-tank doctrine is to be revised on the spot, regardless of how dangerous the improvisation becomes. At the same time, the weather tightens its grip. Temperatures plunge below minus 20 degrees Celsius. Fuel thickens. Engines fail to start. German tanks, designed for temperate European climates, suffer in ways their crews could never have imagined. Lubricants freeze. Electrical systems short. Tracks crack under stress. The T-34, by contrast, continues to move. Its wide tracks distribute weight evenly over snow and mud. Its Christie suspension absorbs uneven ground with brutal efficiency. Its diesel engine, though rough and loud, starts more reliably in the cold. Soviet crews joke grimly that their tank is as stubborn as the Russian winter itself. On December 4th, Weiss's unit is ordered back into the line near Istra Reservoir. The Germans are no longer advancing. They're trying to hold ground against growing Soviet pressure. Weiss climbs back into his Panzer III, hands stiff despite wool gloves. The familiar interior now feels claustrophobic rather than comforting. He checks the gun breech, the ammunition racks. Armor-piercing rounds, still the same ones that bounced uselessly days earlier. The engagement begins at dawn. Soviet artillery opens first, shells bursting in the snow with dull thuds that throw up frozen earth. Then the tanks come again. This time, the Germans do not fire immediately. They wait, holding their nerve, allowing the T-34s to close the distance. At 400 meters, Weiss fires. The shell strikes the side of a T-34's turret and punches through. The tank shudders, then stops. A rare cheer erupts over the radio. But the success is fleeting. Other T-34s advance from different angles, firing as they move. A Panzer to Weiss's right takes a hit to the turret ring and locks solid. The crew bails out under fire, disappearing into the snow. German anti-tank guns finally speak. 5 centimeters pack 38s, drag forward at enormous effort. At close range, they can penetrate, but the cost is high. Gun crews are exposed, freezing, vulnerable to machine gun fire and artillery. This is no longer maneuver warfare. It is attrition. By evening, the battlefield belongs to neither side. Rexlitter the snow. The air smells of burned oil and cordite. Weiss sits inside his silent tank, listening to the metal tick as it cools. He realizes something else has changed. The fear is still there, but it is no longer confusion. He understands the enemy now. He knows why the shells bounced. He knows why the Russians keep coming. Understanding does not make survival easier. At headquarters, Guderian drafts a report that will later become infamous. He writes bluntly of the T-34's superiority in armor design, mobility, and armament. He warns that Germany must respond, or lose the armored war in the East. His words will ripple far beyond the snowbound fields outside Moscow. In factories, engineers will begin sketching new concepts. Sloped armor, heavier guns, wider tracks. Names not yet known will take shape on drafting tables. But for the men at the front, those answers are months, years away. For now, they must face the T-34 with what they have. And winter is only beginning. Section 4. Winter breaks the Blitzkrieg. December 6, 1941. West of Moscow. Volokholamsk Highway. The cold is no longer just an inconvenience. It is an enemy. Unteroffizier Karl Weiss wakes before dawn inside his Panzer III, breath fogging the air as he pulls himself upright. The engine has been running all night, burning precious fuel, because shutting it down risks never starting it again. Around him, the steel hull groans softly as it contracts in a deep freeze. Outside, the battlefield is eerily quiet. That silence shatters without warning. Soviet artillery opens fire along the German line, shells crashing into the frozen ground with a violence that sends shockwaves through the earth. Snow erupts in towering plumes, raining down in hard, icy fragments. Weiss braces instinctively, gripping the turret ring as the Panzer rocks under nearby impacts. Then the tanks come. They emerge from the haze like dark phantoms, T-34s, advancing in loose formations, engines roaring with a confidence that seems almost defiant. Infantry follows behind them, Red Army soldiers hunched low, rifles and submachine guns clutched tight against their chests. The German radio crackles with overlapping voices. Enemy armor advancing frontally. Multiple T-34s. Request immediate support. Support does not come. The Luftwaffe is grounded again. Fuel shortages and mechanical failures have reduced German air presence to almost nothing. What remains of the Panzer divisions must hold alone. Weiss's commander waits, jaw clenched, eyes fixed forward. He has learned the lesson the hard way. Hold fire, he orders. Let them come closer. The T-34s advance relentlessly, shrugging off sporadic hits from Panzer guns that glance away at range. At 300 meters, the order finally comes. Fire. Weiss squeezes the trigger. The Panzer jerks as the shell slams into the side of a T-34. This time it penetrates. Smoke billows from the Soviet tank's turret as it grinds to a halt. Another German tank scores a hit moments later, disabling a second T-34 by smashing its track. But the remaining Soviet tanks press forward undeterred. One T-34 fires on the move, its gun stabilizing just long enough to send a shell crashing through a Panzer's frontal armor. The German tank explodes in flame. Weiss feels the heat even through his own armor. The fight collapses into chaos. German units attempt to maneuver, but the ground betrays them. Snow hides frozen ruts and patches of mud beneath. Narrow tracks slip. Suspension strain. The Panzer III, once agile, now feels clumsy and fragile. The T-34s move differently. They climb over obstacles, others fail. Gun crews are cut down by machine gun fire from the tanks they're trying to stop. Weiss's Panzer takes a glancing hit that cracks a vision block. Shards of glass spray across the turret. He wipes blood from his cheek, hands shaking as he reloads. For the first time since the campaign began, he feels something deeper than fear. He feels outmatched. By midday, the German line bends, then begins to break. Orders come down to fall back to prepared positions. Retreat, once unthinkable, is now routine. Vehicles are abandoned when engines fail. Guns are spiked. Supplies are burned to keep them from falling into Soviet hands. The Red Army presses its advantage. This is no longer a desperate defense of Moscow. It is a counteroffensive. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, commanding Soviet forces, has chosen his moment carefully. Fresh Siberian divisions, hardened, winter-equipped, confident, have arrived. And at their spearhead rolls the T-34, the weapon that has stripped German armor of its invincibility. German commanders struggle to comprehend the shift. Blitzkrieg depends on speed, shock, and momentum. Winter, terrain, and Soviet armor have stolen all three. In the days that follow, German units retreat again and again, fighting delaying actions and temperatures that kill men as efficiently as bullets. Frostbite claims fingers, toes, entire limbs. Tanks freeze solid overnight. Crews sleep inside their vehicles, wrapped in anything they can find. Weiss watches comrades vanish into the snow, some killed, some simply broken by exhaustion and cold. The war he thought he understood has become something else entirely. At night, he listens to distant engine noise, Soviet tanks repositioning, always moving, always present. The sound is constant, inescapable. The T-34 is no longer a surprise. It is a fact of life. And for the German Panzer arm, the realization is devastating. The enemy has seized the initiative, and the winter has given him the perfect weapon to exploit it. The mockery of months past feels obscene now. All that remains is survival. Section 5. The Enemy Within the Steel. December 18th, 1941. Near Klin, northwest of Moscow. Snow falls without pause, a fine white powder that coats men and machines alike, softening the battlefield's edges while making everything deadlier. What was once a fluid front is now a series of frozen scars carved into the landscape. Burned-out vehicles, abandoned guns, shallow graves marked with rifle stocks. Unteroffizier Karl Weiss has stopped counting the days. Time has lost its meaning. There is only cold, movement, and the constant awareness that Soviet armor is never far away. His Panzer III sits half-buried beside a tree line, engine idling low. Fuel is scarce. Ammunition even scarcer. The radio brings fragments of a larger picture. German units withdrawing toward Rzhev. Soviet forces advancing on multiple axes. Entire battalions reduced to shadows of their former strength. What troubles Weiss most is not the retreat itself. It is the feeling that the enemy understands German armor better than ever before. Captured reports circulate among officers. Panzer crews whisper about them at night. Soviet gunners are being trained specifically to engage German tanks, taught where to aim, how to exploit weak points, when to hold fire until the killing shot is guaranteed. The T-34 is no longer just a blunt instrument. It is part of a growing system. That realization becomes horrifyingly clear the next morning. A forward observation post reports movement in the trees ahead. Weiss's commander orders the Panzer to advance cautiously. Infantry lagging behind, struggling through waist-deep snow. Visibility is poor. The forest swallows sound. Then the trap closes. A T-34 bursts from cover at close range, its hull angled sharply. Before Weiss can react, the Soviet tank fires. The shell slams into the Panzer's turret ring. The impact does not penetrate, but it jams the turret. Turret stuck. Weiss shouts. Another T-34 appears from the opposite side, its gun already tracking. A third moves behind them, cutting off retreat. This is not a frontal assault. This is encirclement. German doctrine emphasizes coordination between tanks, infantry, and artillery. But here, in the frozen forest, that coordination collapses. Radios crackle uselessly. Infantry cannot keep up. Artillery is too far back to respond in time. The Soviet tanks move with brutal confidence. They know the Panzer III's limitations. They know where its armor is weakest. One T-34 fires again, smashing through the Panzer's side plate. Inside, the compartment erupts in smoke and flame. Weiss barely escapes, scrambling through the hatch as fire consumes the interior. He collapses into the snow, gasping, lungs burning, face numb from cold and shock. Behind him, his tank, his shelter, his weapon, burns fiercely against the white landscape. Nearby, other German vehicles are meeting the same fate. Soviet tank commanders are exploiting terrain masterfully, using forests, villages, and fold in the ground to negate German optics and long-range firepower. The T-34's mobility allows it to strike unexpectedly, withdraw, and reappear elsewhere. Each engagement feels less like chance and more like design. By afternoon, the German position is untenable. Orders come down to abandon the area entirely. What cannot be moved is destroyed. Engineers blow bridges. Supply dumps are torched. The retreat continues westward, mile by mile, through a countryside that seems determined to consume the invaders whole. That night, Weiss sits with a handful of survivors in a ruined farmhouse. The walls offer little protection from the cold. A single candle flickers, casting long shadows across exhausted faces. No one speaks at first. Finally, an older sergeant breaks the silence. "These aren't the Russians we planned for," he says quietly. No one argues. The assumptions that carried the Wehrmacht across Europe, technological superiority, tactical brilliance, racial arrogance, are dying here in the snow. The Red Army has adapted, learned, and struck back with a weapon that embodies that transformation. The T-34 is not perfect. German crews have noted its crude optics, cramped interior, and unreliable radios. But those flaws no longer matter. What matters is that it works when German machines falter, freeze, or break down. Reports from Berlin grow increasingly urgent. Hitler demands explanations. How could Soviet industry produce such a tank? How could German intelligence have underestimated it so badly? How could Blitzkrieg fail so completely? Engineers and designers begin to feel the pressure. Names like Waproff 6, Henschel, and Mann appear in urgent correspondence. New designs are demanded. Tanks with sloped armor, heavier guns, wider tracks. But those solutions belong to the future. Here and now, in the winter of 1941, German tank crews are paying for past complacency with blood and steel. Weiss stares into the candle flame, hands trembling slightly. He thinks of the early months of the invasion, the jokes, the confidence, the sense that victory was inevitable. Those memories feel like they belong to another lifetime. Outside, the distant rumble of engines echoes through the frozen night. The Red Army is still advancing, and the T-34 rolls on. Section 6 reports to Berlin. December 22nd, 1941. Army Group Center Headquarters, near Smolensk. The headquarters is a sprawl of commandeered buildings half buried in snow, wires strung between trees, generators coughing in the cold. Inside a former schoolhouse, officers crowd around maps pinned to the walls, their edges curling from damp and smoke. Red and blue grease pencil lines overlap in chaotic layers, marking advances that no longer exist and defenses that may not hold until morning. General Oberst Heinz Guderian stands with his gloves still on, breath faintly visible in the unheated room. He has just returned from the front. The smell of burned fuel and frozen earth still clings to his coat. His face is drawn, the sharp confidence that once defined Germany's premier armored commander dulled by exhaustion and anger. He listens as staff officers summarize the situation, but he already knows the truth. He has seen it himself. The T-34. Again and again. An intelligence officer steps forward, holding a folder thick with after-action reports. Units from the 1st, 3rd, and 4th Panzer Divisions. Engagements near Mtsensk, Tula, Klin, and Istra. The language is Blitzkrieg doctrine depends on striking first, from distance, with speed and shock. Being forced into close-range duels negates everything German armor was designed to do. It exposes weaknesses that had never mattered in France or the Balkans. Another officer speaks, his voice tight. The sloped armor deflects most impacts. Crews report shells ricocheting even at favorable angles. Guderian closes his eyes briefly. Sloped armor. Wide tracks. A diesel engine that does not ignite easily when hit. Features German designers dismissed as unnecessary or impractical only a few years earlier. Now they're exacting a brutal price. He orders the room cleared except for senior commanders and technical officers. When the door closes, his tone hardens. This is not an isolated problem, he says. This is systemic. Our tanks are outclassed under these conditions. Someone mentions that the T-34's optics are inferior, that its crew ergonomics are poor, that its transmission is unreliable. Guderian cuts him off. Those are inconveniences, he snaps. Not fatal flaws. What follows is not a debate, but an admission. German intelligence failed. The Panzerwaffe underestimated Soviet industrial capacity and engineering philosophy. The assumption that the Red Army could not field a modern medium tank in large numbers has collapsed as completely as the summer offensive. Messages are drafted to Berlin. They are unusually frank. Guderian personally insists on language that leaves no room for political optimism. He describes the T-34 as a decisive factor, warns that continued reliance on existing Panzer III and IV designs will result in unacceptable losses, and urges immediate development of new armored vehicles incorporating sloped armor, heavier guns, and improved mobility. The documents move up the chain quickly. Within days, they reach Adolf Hitler. At the Wolfschanz in East Prussia, Hitler reacts with fury and disbelief. He demands explanations, suspects exaggeration, and briefly accuses commanders of defeatism. But reports keep coming, not just from Army Group Center, but from the north and south as well. Captured T-34s are requested for examination. Technical teams are ordered to the front. Engineers are told to observe, measure, and learn urgently. In the meantime, German crews improvise. Panzer units are instructed to aim for tracks, gun mantlets, and rear engine compartments. Anti-aircraft guns, particularly the feared 8.8 centimeters flak, are dragged forward to serve as improvised tank killers. Infantry are trained to engage T-34s at close range with mines and bundled explosives, a desperate and often suicidal task. None of it feels like victory. For men like Karl Weiss, the war has changed shape entirely. It is no longer about speed and momentum, but about survival and adaptation. Every engagement with Soviet armor carries the knowledge that the enemy's machine is built for this environment, and theirs is not. On Christmas Eve, snow falls heavily across the front. There are no carols, no ceasefires, only the distant thunder of guns and the knowledge that the Red Army, once mocked and dismissed, now holds the initiative. In Berlin, design offices burn late into the night. Sketches are drawn, specifications rewritten. The seeds of future machines, the Panther, the Tiger, begin to take form on drafting tables. But those tanks are months, even years away. For now, German tank crews face the T-34 with what they have. And winter shows no mercy. Section 7, Learning Under Fire. January 3rd, 1942. West of Rzeszów. The new year arrives without ceremony. There are no speeches, no banners, no sense of renewal. Only the grinding continuation of a war that has turned against its invaders. Temperatures plunge well below zero. Steel contracts. Lubricants thicken. Men wake with frost in their beards and ice in their boots. For the German panzer crews pulled back into defensive positions west of Moscow, survival now depends on learning faster than the enemy can kill them. Unteroffizier Karl Weiss has been reassigned to a replacement Panzer III, hastily repaired and already scarred. The paint is chipped, the engine temperamental, the gun unchanged. What has changed is how they fight. The briefing before their first engagement of the year is blunt. Do not engage frontally. Do not fire at maximum range. Do not pursue alone. The instructions would have sounded like cowardice 6 months earlier. Now they're doctrine born of blood. Scouts report Soviet armor probing the German line at dawn. Through binoculars, Weiss sees them crest a distant ridge, dark silhouettes against the snow. T-34s. At least a dozen. They do not charge. They stop, engines idling, hulls angled. Infantry fans out around them, using the tanks as moving cover. This is not the clumsy coordination German crews once mocked. It is deliberate, controlled. The Germans wait. Artillery opens first, shells screaming overhead and bursting among the Soviet infantry. Snow and earth erupt into the air. The T-34s respond almost immediately, advancing in staggered formation, guns already tracking German positions. Weiss's commander gives the order to hold fire. The distance closes. 800 meters. 600. His gunner's hands are steady, finger resting lightly on the trigger. Sweat beads beneath his helmet despite the cold. At 400 meters, the order comes. Fire. The Panzer's gun barks, the recoil slamming through the turret. The shell strikes the lead T-34 at an angle and deflects, spinning harmlessly away in a shower of sparks. Another German tank fires. Same result. The Soviet tanks do not hesitate. They return fire with terrifying accuracy. A Panzer to Weiss's left takes a hit to the glassy plate. The armor cracks. Flames burst from the hatches. The crew does not emerge. Tracks, the commander shouts. Aim for the tracks. Weiss adjusts. Fires again. This time the shell smashes into the T-34's running gear. Metal twists. The Soviet tank slews sideways, immobilized but still firing. Its turret traverses smoothly, calmly, as if unaffected by the damage. A second shot finally disables it. But for every Soviet tank slowed or stopped, another takes its place. The battlefield becomes a brutal exchange of attrition. Short-range duels fought amid smoke, snow, and shattered trees. German crews maneuver constantly, try to flank, to isolate, to avoid being overrun. The Red Army presses forward relentlessly, absorbing losses and maintaining pressure. When the engagement ends hours later, the ground is littered with wrecks, German and Soviet alike. The line holds, barely. As Weiss climbs out his tank, legs trembling, he notices something unsettling. The Soviet crews fought without hesitation, without panic, even when hit. These are not desperate men thrown into battle. These are trained soldiers, confident in their machine. Captured Soviet prisoners later confirm it. They speak of the T-34 with pride. They know its strengths. They trust it. They believe deeply that it will carry them to victory. That belief matters. German morale, once unshakable, is eroding. Each encounter with the T-34 reinforces a growing understanding. The enemy is not only catching up, they are in some ways ahead. Commanders adapt where they can. Mixed formations of tanks, infantry, and anti-tank guns become standard. Ambush tactics replace sweeping maneuvers. The battlefield shrinks, becoming tighter, deadlier, more personal. But adaptation has limits. No amount of tactical cleverness can change physics. No training can make thin armor thicker. No discipline can turn an underpowered gun into a killing weapon. The men know this. They talk quietly at night, voices low, about rumors from Germany. New tanks, heavier guns, sloped armor of their own, machines that will answer the T-34 at last. They cling to those rumors like lifelines. Until then, every engagement feels like a test of skill, nerve, and luck. Every Soviet tank sighted brings a tightening in the chest, a calculation of angles and distances measured in heartbeats. The mockery is long gone. In its place is respect and fear. Section 8. The Turning of Doctrine. January 15, 1942. Berlin. Snow falls softly over the capital, muting the city's usual sounds. Inside the Ministry of Armaments and War Production, the atmosphere is anything but quiet. Corridors echo with hurried footsteps. Offices glow late into the night. The war that was supposed to be decided in months has entered a phase no one planned for. Men in white coats and military uniforms crawl over it, measure angles, trace armor thickness, photograph suspension components. They argue quietly in clipped, technical German, voices tight with urgency. This slope, one engineer says, running his hand along the glassy plate. It increases effective thickness by nearly 50%. Another nods and deflects shots, even when penetration should be possible. They note the wide tracks, the Christie suspension adapted for rough terrain, the diesel engine tucked low in the hull. Every feature speaks of a design philosophy radically different from Germany's pre-war assumptions. Not elegance, effectiveness. Reports from the front are spread across the table. Maps, casualty lists, gun performance charts. The conclusions are unavoidable. The Panzer III, once the backbone of Blitzkrieg, is obsolete against modern Soviet armor. The Panzer IV, originally intended as a support tank, shows more promise but lacks sufficient armor and gun power in its current configuration. A decision forms, slowly but decisively. German armor doctrine must change. Meetings follow meetings. Specifications are drafted, revised, and redrafted. Engineers from Daimler-Benz, MAN, Henschel, and Krupp are summoned. Competition is encouraged. Time is the enemy. Out of this pressure emerge the outlines of new machines. A medium tank to replace the Panzer III and IV. Sloped armor. A high-velocity gun capable of defeating the T-34 at range. Wide tracks for snow and mud. This project will become the Panther. Alongside it, a heavy breakthrough tank. Thick armor, massive firepower, designed to dominate any battlefield it enters. This one will be known as the Tiger. On paper, they are formidable. On paper, they promise redemption. At the front, German crews are unaware of the details, but they feel the shift. Orders change. Training manuals are rewritten even as the fighting continues. Tactical bulletins emphasize combined arms, ambush positions, and a careful husbanding of armor. The language of invincibility disappears. In its place comes realism. Carl Weiss experiences this change firsthand during a conference held in a frozen barn outside Vyazma. Officers gather around a charcoal brazier, boots steaming as ice melts from the soles. A captain speaks plainly. "We are no longer hunters," he says. "We are defenders. We choose our ground. We choose our fights." No one protests. That afternoon, Weiss's unit prepares an ambush along a narrow road flanked by trees. Engineers have mindy approaches. Anti-tank guns are dug in, barrels camouflaged with branches. The Panzer IIIs are position hull down, guns trained on a kill zone barely 200 meters wide. When the T-34s come, they roll confidently into the trap. The first Soviet tank hits a mine. Its front lifts, slams back down. Almost instantly, German guns open fire from multiple angles. Tracks are shattered. Turrets ring with impacts. One T-34 burns. Another slews into a ditch. For a moment, just a moment, it feels like old times. But even now, the cost is high. Soviet return fire destroys 2 German tanks before the survivors withdraw. The ambush works, but it does not feel like victory. It feels like survival. That night, Weiss cleans his weapon in silence. He thinks about how much has changed since June, about how quickly arrogance has been stripped away by reality, about how the Red Army, once dismissed as backward, has forced the Wehrmacht to reinvent itself under fire. The T-34 has done more than kill German tanks. It has broken German certainty. And in war, certainty is often the most dangerous weapon of all. Section 9. Outside Moscow. No more illusions. February 5th, 1942. The approaches to Gzhatsk, west of Moscow. The front has frozen into something rigid and brutal, like the land itself. Snowbanks rise higher than men. Forest roads are narrowed to icy corridors. The war here is no longer about sweeping movements or bold thrusts. It is about holding ground measured in meters, sometimes in footsteps. Carl Weiss now recognizes the sound of a T-34 T-34 before he sees it. The deep, uneven growl of its diesel engine carries differently through the cold air, heavier and more confident than the gasoline whine of German tanks. When that sound drifts across the tree-line, conversations stop. Jokes die mid-sentence. Men check ammunition without being told. This morning, it comes just after dawn. Visibility is poor. A pale sun struggles behind clouds, casting no warmth. Weiss's Panzer III is dug in behind a low rise, hull down, engine off to conserve fuel. Frost crystals coat the periscope lenses. His breath fogs the interior. Through the sight, movement appears. First one T-34, then another, then several more, advancing slowly, deliberately, infantry close behind. They are not charging. They are testing, probing, learning, just as the Germans have been forced to learn. An artillery barrage precedes them, shells walking methodically across German positions. The ground shakes. Snow collapses into trenches. Men huddle, waiting for the pattern to pass. When the tanks advance again, Weiss feels a familiar tightening in his chest. This is not fear in the raw sense. It is calculation layered over dread. Distance, angle, timing. He waits. At 300 meters, he fires. The shell strikes a T-34's turret cheek. It dents, but does not penetrate. The Soviet tank responds instantly, firing on the move. The round slams into the earth just short of Weiss's position, spraying snow and debris across the hull. Another German tank fires. This one hits a track. The T-34 lurches immobilized, but its gun keeps firing. The battlefield fractures into chaos. German anti-tank guns join in, their crews exposed, firing as fast as they can load. Soviet infantry fan out, returning fire, using the tanks as shields. Smoke thickens, swallowing shapes and sound. Weiss fires again, and again. Finally, at close range, a lucky shot punches through the rear of a T-34 as it turns. Flames burst from the engine deck. The Soviet crew bails out, some on fire, some already dead. Weiss feels no triumph, only a grim, hollow relief. The engagement lasts less than an hour. When it ends, the Soviet force withdraws, leaving wrecks behind, but the Germans have lost ground. 2 Panzer IIIs are destroyed. Another is damaged beyond quick repair. Infantry casualties are heavy, and the Soviets will be back. Later that day, Weiss overhears an officer reading an intercepted Red Army order. The language is confident, forward-looking. It speaks of pressure, of exploiting German weakness, of winter as an ally. There is no trace of desperation. That realization settles heavily over the unit. This is no longer an enemy fighting to survive. This is an enemy preparing to win. Across the Eastern Front, similar scenes play out. From Army Group north to the southern sectors near Kharkov, German formations report the same thing. Soviet armor, led by the T-34, is dictating the terms of engagement. It is forcing the Wehrmacht into reactive postures, draining strength, eroding momentum. In Berlin, the implications are finally understood. The invasion has failed in its primary objective. Moscow still stands. The Red Army is not broken, and the tank once laughed at in the summer dust now dominates the frozen battlefield. The mockery of 1941 feels obscene in retrospect. German soldiers had laughed at crude welds, at poor paint, at unfamiliar shapes rolling out of the eastern mist. They had called the T-34 primitive, inferior, unworthy of serious concern. Outside Moscow, those illusions lie buried beneath snow and steel. As night falls, Weiss writes a brief letter home. He chooses his words carefully. He does not describe the tanks. He does not describe the fear. He writes only that the war is not what he expected, and that nothing here is easy anymore. He folds the letter, tucks it into his coat, and prepares for another night in the cold. Somewhere beyond the darkness, engines rumble again. The T-34 is still out there, and the Germans now know exactly what it means. Section 10. What Moscow Changed Forever. March 1st, 1942. Eastern Front, west of Vyazma. The first hints of thaw creep into the frozen earth. almost imperceptible at first. Snow softens, roads turn slick. Beneath the white crust, mud waits patiently, ready. Its silhouette appears again and again at the edge of German positions, a reminder that the Red Army has survived and adapted. By March, the truth is no longer debated at any level of command. The Battle of Moscow has changed the war. For the first time since 1939, the Wehrmacht has been decisively stopped, then forced backward. Blitzkrieg has failed not because German soldiers lacked courage or discipline, but because the enemy proved capable of learning, producing, and fighting at a scale Germany never expected. And at the center of that lesson stands the T-34. German officers now speak of it openly, without bitterness, without mockery. In after-action reports and private conversations, it is described with professional respect. Some even call it brilliant, not in refinement, but in purpose. It did exactly what it was designed to do. In one final engagement before Weiss's unit is rotated out of the line, he sees a damaged T-34 abandoned in a field. Its tracks are broken, its turret scarred by multiple impacts. German infantry move cautiously around it, weapons ready. Up close, Weiss studies it in silence. The welds are uneven. The paint is flaking. The optics are crude compared to German standards. And yet, this machine survived hit after hit, kept moving when others would have failed, and carried its crew through conditions that destroyed far more elegant designs. Weiss reaches out and touches the cold steel of its sloped armor. He remembers laughing. That feels like a lifetime ago. Back in Germany, factories strained to meet impossible demands. The Panther and Tiger projects accelerate, absorbing enormous resources. They will eventually challenge the T-34 on the battlefield, but at a cost Germany can scarcely afford. Complexity replaces simplicity. Precision replaces mass. And time slips away. The Red Army, meanwhile, builds thousands more T-34s. They roll off production lines in Nizhny Tagil, Chelyabinsk, and Stalingrad. Workers labor day and night, often under bombardment, driven by a sense of national survival. The tank evolves incrementally, but its core remains unchanged. Reliable, mobile, deadly enough. By the end of 1942, the T-34 is no longer a surprise. It is a constant. For German tank crews, the psychological shift is complete. They no longer expect technological superiority to save them. Every engagement is treated as a contest of equals, or worse. Doctrine becomes defensive, attritional, grim. The arrogance of 1941 is gone. In its place is a hard, unromantic understanding of modern industrial war. Outside Moscow, German tank crews mocked the T-34 when they first saw it. They laughed at its appearance. They dismissed its construction. They believed experience and doctrine would carry the day. Then they faced it in snow and mud and fire. And nothing about the war was ever the same again.